In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
So long as the wars of the Latin states were confined to minor conflicts with one or two petty Muslim princes, no grave danger was entailed. But when major combinations of Muslim powers appeared, then the situation could become perilous indeed. On such occasions, the safety of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the other principalities absolutely demanded that they cooperate for mutual defense, as has often happened in more modern times. However, the necessity for common action against a common foe was uncommonly difficult for kings and princes to appreciate. And even when the necessity for common action was perceived by the leaders of the Latin East, petty domestic quarrels between them frequently made their combinations with one another tenuous and half-hearted affairs. Thus, it was that when the first concerted Muslim attack upon one of the Latin states occurred, the other states were diffident and disinclined to lend assistance to the one attacked. The occasion arose in 1144 when the easternmost of the Latin states, Edessa, fell prey to Zengi. Zengi, whose rise to power had begun at Mosul in 1127, gradually acquired authority through war, intimidation, and treaty over a whole host of Muslim principalities in Syria. When his large and powerful army turned its unwelcome attention upon Edessa in 1144, Zengi found the Latins divided. The Count of Edessa, Jocelyn II, was at odds with the Prince of Antioch. The Count of Tripoli was only vaguely interested in the events so far to the east, and in Jerusalem, King Fulk had just died, leaving the government in the hands of Queen Melisenda as regent for their 13-year-old son Baldwin III. Consequently, Zengi found his attack opposed only by the negligible forces of Edessa itself. This comes from the medieval sourcebook William of Tyre, The Fall of Edessa.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Time again. The party is over, the fire is low, and all the ordinary people have went to bed already, and we are the only ones left. Recording straight down the pillar of severity from the ritual space far beneath the Stigmata Studio building located in the heart of the Steel City, I am John Towers, and this is the Abracast. So, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm pretty amped about this episode. We're finally getting back on track with our Crusades episodes. So, we ended the First Crusade, and then we spent a little bit of time talking about the foundation, the formation of the Knights Templar. You If you're new to the show, you might not have heard those. You can go to the featured topic link on Advertise.com and find the Crusades episodes. They're all bundled up like right there. So the Second Crusades was not a very long ordeal at all. And this is the first episode of the Second Crusade. And this is kind of what kicks the whole Second Crusade off. So the First Crusade was a wildly successful misadventure. And we're kind of going to just pick right up what happens after the First Crusade and what starts this Second Crusade. What I found interesting with getting into this Second Crusade business is the politics of it. Specifically in episode 3 of this, we're going to be talking about some of the weird political choices that were made that ultimately led to Crusaders dividing their forces. And I think it's very interesting, and the reasons they did it was very interesting. So we're not just looking at wars and battles and religion, logistics and equipment. And I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into all that stuff. But like with our First Crusade series, kind of getting into like the motivation, how these guys got motivated, that's going to be for the second episode for sure. And I'm amped to get started, because this character, the Darth Vader in this story, this Zenji guy, we're going to hear a lot about him in this episode, and then we're going to hear about him also, how the story resolves itself in. So for all you guys playing at home, summon your Vessel of the Art. If you're generous enough to have an official Vessel of the Art, this is for you. Thank you very much to my Patreon and Subscribestar supporters. The ancient Chinese curse. May we live in interesting times. And indeed we do. I mean, if you would... For like a lot of my life, I thought watching the space shuttle blow up, Challenger, it happened when I was in middle school, would have been the craziest thing I've ever fucking seen. I don't even know if that's on my top 5 anymore. So here's to you, supporters of the show. Thank you very much. May we live in interesting times. So don't forget to visit the website, abercast.com. T-shirts, the new T-shirts are up. Featured sources this evening are the medieval sourcebook, William of Tyre, The Fall of Edessa, and Ancient Encyclopedia. You can find that at ancient.eu. These guys, I'm just going to get into it here. The city still managed to become, we're just talking about the history of Edessa here. Managed to become the great center of culture and learning, especially of Christian scholarship. The city had been an early adopter of Christianity in the 2nd century, with the first recorded church being already active in 202 CE. Edessa became the most important bishopric in Syria. Edessa was attacked several times over the centuries, especially by the neighboring Sassanids, notably in 503 by Kavad, the king of Persia. Although his siege was not successful, in the on-off wars between Persia and the Byzantine Empire, Edessa was once more attacked in 544. This time by Chosaurus. Sorry. But again, the city stood firm. Between 638 and 641 was a different story, and Edessa fell under Arab control, and it not returned to Byzantine rule until the Byzantine general John Corcoas took it back in 944. The city nevertheless remained an important Christian center, especially in terms of translations, manuscript production, education. The Cathedral of Edessa was described by the 10th century Arab scholar Al-Makdidis as a wonder of the world. The Seljuk Turks would finally conquer Edessa in 1078, but then the Western armies of the First Crusade recaptured it in 1098. Edessa was lost and recaptured by the Byzantines in 1032, thanks to the effort of General George Maniakis, but it remained, as ever, a bone of contention between the rival empires. The local Muslim emirs attacked the city in 1036 and 1038. Then a more permanent political situation was arrived at when the Seljuk Muslims won significant victories in Asia Minor against Byzantine armies, notably the Battle of Manzikert in ancient Armenia. In August 1071, Edessa was to be handed over as part of a peace deal between the Seljuks and the captured Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. But in the event, the Byzantines held on to it. Such was its strategic importance. Various leaders of the First Crusade created several new states in the Middle East. The first among them was the county of Edessa, and the county was established under dubious circumstances by Baldwin of Bulgon. In March 1098, Baldwin and his army of around 80 dudes, 80 knights plus infantry, had actually been invited by Thoros, the Armenian ruler of Edessa, who had come to his aid against the imminent arrival of a Muslim army from Mosul in Iraq. Baldwin, who had agreed to lend his support on the condition that he become Thoros' heir, but on arrival, the Frenchmen either joined or turned a blind eye to a dissident mob, which lynched Thoros, and Baldwin then created the first Latin state with himself as the ruler. All right, that's the backdrop. So the success of the Christians in the First Crusade had been largely due to the disunion among their enemies. But the Muslims learned in time the value of united action, and in 1144 succeeded in capturing Edessa, one of the principal Christian outposts in the east. The fall of the city of Edessa, followed by the loss of the entire country of Edessa, aroused Western Europe to the danger which threatened the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem and led to another crusading enterprise. So we're going to jump to Crusades and the Crusaders. The fall of Edessa, 1144, the event that set the Second Crusade in motion. In the early 1140s, the Atabeg Zengi formed relations with the Seljuk Sultan of Baghdad as part of his efforts to build his power base east of the Euphrates River. However, in order to effectively do so, he had to find another way to subjugate the Artuquid princes and the Kurdish warlords in the north of Syria. As customary, he did so with brutal force. Quera Arslan, one Artuquid Turk, forged an alliance with Jocelyn II of Edessa. Now, this Jocelyn II of Edessa, he was the Count of Edessa after his father, Jocelyn I. In efforts to ward off an impending attack by Zengi's army, in exchange for aid, Quora offered to relinquish the territory to the Franks. So the picture this is kind of painting is we have this hostile, aggressive kind of opponent. And we have this kind of Jocelyn character. He's kind of he's kind of lazy, and he is not living in the capital of his city state. He's kind of hiding. So this is a recipe for disaster, especially when we take into account this Zenji character. Not only is he hostile and belligerent and aggressive, he's also politically minded because he's going around and consolidating this power base and all the lands around Edessa. So this whole thing is kind of a recipe for disaster. This count has his fucking hands off the wheel. And I mean, he's surrounded in, a foreign land, surrounded by enemies. And this, I don't think that this is the kind of character you want leading your city. That's just me. I mean, history bears this out. So during the time which elapsed between the death of King Baldwin's father and Baldwin's elevation to the throne, one Zenji, a vicious man, was the most powerful of the Eastern Turks. His city, formerly called Nineveh, but now known as Mosul, is the metropolis of the region, which was called Azur. Zenji, its lord and governor at the time, laid siege to the city of Edessa, and more commonly called Rojas, the greatest and most splendid city of the Medes. Zenji did this relying on numbers and strength of his men, and also of the very dangerous strife which had arisen between Prince Raymond of Antioch and the Count Jocelyn of Edessa. The city of Edessa lies beyond the Euphrates, one-day journey from the river. And the aforesaid Count of Edessa, contrary to customs of his predecessors, had ceased to live in the city and made his constant and perpetual abode in a place called Turbessel. Turbessel? They're throwing them all at me tonight. He did this both because of the richness of the spot and because of his own laziness. Here, far from the tumult and free to pursue his pleasures, the Count failed to take proper care of his noble city. The population of Edessa was made up of Chaldeans and Armenians, unwarlike men, scarcely familiar with the use of arms and accustomed only to the acts of trade. The city was only rarely visited by Latins, and only a few of them lived there. The safekeeping of the city was entrusted solely to mercenaries. This is another problem. And if you were not paid according to the type of service they performed or the length of time in which they were engaged, indeed, they would often had to wait a year or more for payment. I'm thinking briefly of Fight Club. We are the people that cook your meals. We guard you while you sleep. Don't fuck with us. Both Baldwin and the elder Jocelyn, when they held the county, made their home permanently and customarily in Edessa, and took care to have the city supplied with food, arms, and other necessary items from nearby places, and they had thus been able both to maintain themselves in safety and also to overawe the neighboring towns with their strength. So the Jocelyn here, Baldwin and the elder Jocelyn, that's our Jocelyn's dad. There was, as we have said before, a bad feeling between Count Jocelyn and the Prince of Antioch. A feeling that was not hidden, but rather had become an open hatred. For this reason, each of them took little or no care if the others were attacked or suffered misfortune. Rather, they rejoiced at the others' catastrophes and were made glad by the others' mishaps. So, I mean, we got a failure of leadership all over this, on both sides. On both sides of Edessa and Antioch. But on the other side, what we don't have is we don't have a failure of leadership. So, in the fall of 1144, Jocelyn assembles a large army, and he rode out to assist Quera Arslan. So, this is the dude at the beginning, I believe he's a Turk or Armenian that is allied with Jocelyn. So what if this was a big mind fuck? Like, what if he allies with him and then he's like, he's going to feign or overreact to like a harassing force to make Jocelyn draw his army out of the city? It's interesting. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just looking at the facts on the ground, and if this Zinji is, you know, so brilliant and ruthless and whatever, how come this couldn't have been the case? Anyhow, he must have been, well, okay, so the writer is saying like, well, because this guy's he's lazy and stupid. He must have been overconfident in his country's ability to defend itself from these Muslim invaders, because he left very few men, including the city's archbishop, behind to protect Edessa. Jocelyn also wasn't aware of Zinji's shrewd character and ambition. So if this guy's already toppling area, he's already kicking the asses of other Muslims to take over their land, and he wasn't aware of it. This is a critical failure of this Jocelyn character's leadership. When I was prepping this, I was sympathetic towards him, but now that I'm diving into it, I'm like, no, this guy should have fucking known better. He should have known, and he should have fucking known better, like the dude who touched Marcellus Wallace's wife's feet. The aforesaid great Prince Zenji took the opportunity offered by this situation. He gathered an innumerable cavalry forces throughout all of the east, and he even called up the people of the cities neighboring Edessa. See, that's what I'm saying. This guy, he must have been pretty charismatic or pretty politically savvy, politically agile to be able to do this. And he brought them with him to lay siege to the day. He blockaded all of the entrances to the city so that the besieged citizens could not get out, and so that those who wished to help them could not get in. The resulting shortage of food aid provisions caused great suffering for the besieged. The city, however, was surrounded by a formidable wall. In the upper town, there were high towers, and down below there was a lower town where the citizens could take refuge even if the city itself were taken. So I was trying to imagine what this means, and I can't imagine it. The closest thing I got to was something like Helm's Deep, like they had a keep, but I don't know why you would describe that as a lower town. I mean, if it was that case that it was like a defensive position, a lower town is a shitty way to describe it, right? Anyhow, I couldn't find anything on it to make it any clearer. All these defenses could be of use against the enemy only if there were men willing to fight for their freedom, men who would resist the foe valiantly. The defenses would be useless, however, if there were none among the besieged who were willing to serve as defenders. Towers, walls, earthworks, all of little value to a city unless there were defenders to man them. Zenji found the town bereft of defenders and was much encouraged. He encircled the town with his forces, assigned the officers of his legion to appropriate stations, and they dug in. The catapults and siege engines weakened the fortifications. The continual shooting of arrows tormented the citizens incessantly, and the besieged were given no respite, maybe. It was announced, meanwhile, and the news was also spread by rumor, that the city of Edessa, a city faithful to the Christian God, was suffering at the agony of a siege at the hands of the enemy of the faith and the foe of the Christian name. At this news, the hearts of the faithful far and wide were touched, and zealous men began to take arms to harass the wicked. The Count, when he heard of it, was stricken with anguish. Energetically, he assembled some of his forces. Skip ahead a little bit. We went around admonishing his faithful friends. Humbly, he besought his lord, the Prince of Antioch, and through messengers he forcefully urged the prince to assist him in his labors to free Edessa from the yoke of future servitude. So this is interesting. One of the things that this dude's worried about, and this is something that, like, even today, when we get into these crusade episodes, I constantly find Islamic apologetics everywhere. I find it everywhere. Every fucking paragraph I read, every fucking sentence that I read out loud, every fucking footnote, it's everywhere. The Muslims were just defending. They weren't really jihading. They were just trying to, secure their power base. He was a great general. He was a brilliant, brilliant general. He just had bad intelligence. It's fucking everywhere. Except for right here. Listen to this sentence again. He went around admonishing his faithful friends. Humbly, he besought his lord, the Prince of Antioch, and through messengers, he forcefully urged the prince to assist him in his labors to free Edessa from the yoke of future servitude. He's not talking about the people in his kingdom, the people in his county, the people in his city dying. He's talking about slavery. And we've talked about Islamic slavery until I'm blue in the face. If you're going to go back to the feature topic link to look at this Crusader business, do that. Do that all. But also look at, what was it? In the American Sermon episodes, find one of those American... it should just be under there's a feature topic link for Islam, for just Islam. Go listen to all those, too. This dude is going to enslave whoever survives this siege. Spoiler alert, we're actually going to see a little bit of it. Messengers bearing the news of the sinister event came even... We're going to see a little bit of it, that's for sure. And this dude's going to see a little bit of it too. And he's going to see a little bit about why it's a bad idea. You might have to listen to the second part of this series for that story, though. I'm sorry. My mind is catching up with my mouth, I guess. Messengers bearing the news of the sinister events came even to the kingdom of Jerusalem, bearing witness to the siege of Edessa and to the misfortunes suffered by its citizens. The queen, who had charge of the kingdom's government, on the advice of the council of the nobles, which she consulted, sent her kinsman Manasses, the royal constable Philip of Nablus, and Elinander of Tiberias. Hey, Tiberias. Together with a great multitude of soldiers, with all speed to Edessa, that they might give the Lord count and the suffering citizens the comfort which they desired. Hey, if you're going to go back and fact check this stuff, or you're interested in it, you want to go back and listen to some of those Crusade episodes, I also recommend my first episode of 9/11 in context, because we talk about the siege of Vienna, and that's what should have happened right here. The Edessa's under siege, and this kingdom sends reinforcements. And during the siege of Vienna, 1683, what happens is they didn't just send reinforcements. King Jan Sobieski III showed up with a bunch of lunatic flying hussars, they're called. And he did the largest cavalry charge in history and crushed this Ottoman Empire at the siege of Vienna. This is what should have happened here at Edessa, but it doesn't. We're going to see. Spoiler alert. before I make the transaction, here, we're just going to do this.
Are you the type of person who has to close and minimize windows before the boss can see? Are there things that you've seen that you dare not mention to the normies and pink boys you see shambling down the sidewalk? Have you taken one step too many down the rabbit hole? Well, fear not. You are always welcome on The Whole Rabbit, where we discuss things like chaos magic, Aleister Crowley, and the tarot. But that's not all. We decode the mysterious Illuminati symbolism in films like Midsummer, Joker, Dr. Sleep, and Eyes Wide Shut. On The Whole Rabbit, we even discuss occult manuals like the Kabbalion and Abramelin the Mage. Here's wherever you most enjoy listening to podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are available. So tune in to The Whole Rabbit every week and join the conversation. And remember, eat carrots, shoot lasers.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
All right, where was I? When the news of the siege reached Jocelyn, he immediately appealed to King Fulk and the Queen Melisende for her help. He also asked Raymond of Antioch for aid, but according to William of Tyre, Raymond deliberately delayed because of his hatred for Jocelyn. Queen Melisende sent a relief army commanded by Manassas, Philip, and Elinard, which we just talked about. But by the time they arrived at Edessa, it was too late. The Edessians had endured relentless bombardments from Zengi's siege engines for four fucking weeks. Until Zengi managed to breach the walls. Combat engineers! Gregory the priest wrote that as many as 2,000 died from suffocation as the inhabitants fought to gain access to the citadel. One Muslim chronicler wrote that Zengi's troops sent to pillage, slaying, capturing, ravishing, and looting, and their hands were filled with such quantities of money, furnishing animals, booty, and captives as rejoiced their spirits and gladdened their hearts. All right, let's look at it a different way, a little bit deeper perhaps. The Prince of Antioch, however, rejoiced in Edessa's adversity and paid small attention to the duties for the common welfare. He was little concerned that personal hatred ought not cause public harm and made excuses while he put off giving aid, which had been requested. Zengi, meanwhile, pressed continual assaults on the city, and he ran the gamut of attacks and left nothing untried which could harass the citizens and aid them in the control of the city. He sent combat engineers. He sent sappers through the trenches and underground tunnels to undermine walls as they dug passages beneath the walls. We know this. We've seen this. Go listen to that 9/11 episode. They buttressed these with posts which were afterwards set on fire. A great part of the wall was thus broken down. This breach in the wall, more than 100 cubits wide, gave the enemy an entrance into the city. The enemy now had the approach that they had desired. Their forces rushed into the city, and they slew with their swords the citizens whom they encountered, sparing neither age, condition, nor sex. Of them it might have been said, they murder the widow and the stranger. They slay the orphan, the youth, and the virgin, together with the old man. The city therefore was captured and delivered to the swords of the enemy. The more prudent, more experienced citizens rushed to the citadel, which we have said was in the city. This they did so that they might at least preserve their lives or their children. So maybe this was the low town they were talking about. The citadel was their keep. Why would they call the citadel? So when I think of a citadel, I think of like a high tower, right? I don't know. We're talking about two different sources here. And like I said, I really couldn't find anything to shed any kind of light on this. But if this is where they ran as their last resort, it has to be what they're talking about, right? Right? Am I right? Their children and their wives, if only for a short time at the gate, there was such a crush of people trying to enter that because of the press of the crowd, many were suffocated and died miserably. It's like when you're stuck in the front of a Jersey barrier in a mosh pit. You just get fucking crushed. Let's talk about one of these motherfuckers that died. Among these were the most revered Hugh, the archbishop of the city. He was said to have expired in this fashion, crushed between a Jersey barrier and a mosh pit together with several of his clerics. Some of those were present would blame his miserable end on the archbishop himself, for he is said to have collected a vast sum of money. Oh, it's just like that scene in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Not whatever Robin Hood you guys are fucking thinking about. I'm talking about the Kevin Costner Robin Hood. Where the bishop grabs all the money and he runs and he doesn't make it out alive, I don't think. Who gets him? It's not Big John. It's not Aziz, the politically correct Muslim sidekick. Who is it? Friar Tuck gets him. That's right. He fucking smashes him with like a mug or something. I don't know. Anyhow, he's got a vast sum of money. Okay, so it says if he paid his soldiers, they would have been helpful to the city, but he preferred to heap up his treasure like a miser rather than to consider his dying people. Thus it happened that he received the reward of his greed by perishing with his people between a Jersey barrier and a mosh pit. Thus, while the Prince of Antioch, overcome by foolish hatred, delayed rendering help that he owed to his brothers, and while the Count waited help from abroad, the ancient city of Edessa, devoted to Christianity since the time of the apostles, and delivered from the superstitions of the infidels through the words and preaching of the apostle Thaddeus, passed into an undeserved servitude. Thus, on 23 December 1144, Edessa fell to the Saracens, the event that would set Christendom ablaze with the crusading zeal once more. As for Zengi, he was on a mission to unite all of Syria under his authority. So this is one of those things, in my opinion. This is missing the mark with this apologetic nonsense that we were talking about before. We see this over and over again in these episodes. And I'll say it plainly here. Zengi was on a mission, and his mission was jihad. Oh, if you're going to backtrack me on this, go and listen to the sword verse episode. It's so good. I actually thought that was probably one of my best episodes I've ever done. The sword verse. Not like a universe. It's the sword verse. Like it's a song about a sword. It's a verse about a sword. Which is hilarious because there's not even a sword in it. The capture of Edessa was just another territory added to his realm of influence. Regardless, Zenji's accomplishments, particularly his capture of Edessa from the Franks, were an inspiration to his people and his descendants, and they viewed Zenji's capture of Edessa from the Franks as a great service rendered to Islam in his efforts to unite all Muslims as a means to take back territory lost to the Franks. And if you're wondering what the big deal is about that last sentence, take back the territory lost to the Franks, listen to that sword verse episode I just told you about. It explains it in detail. So the second episode in this series is really good. We're going to talk a little bit about this sacred fire of crusaderdom or whatever. We're also going to find out the end of Zenji and Jocelyn's stories are. And Zenji's is so... I mean, they're both awful and crazy. I mean, they are both awful and crazy. Anyhow, so thanks. Sign up to the mailing list, visit the website, and do all of that stuff. And I'll let Hilla tell you what to do. I'm John, and this has been the Abercast. And hey, during this trying time, I just want to put all joking aside for like 1 second and stop offending people for a second and just say, hey, I hope that everybody's doing good. I hope you're checking in on your neighbors. I hope you're checking in on your family. And I hope you're checking in on yourselves and the people in your life that need it the most. And my biggest concern with this is the mental health schism that I feel might just rip our culture apart at any given moment. And I guess, I'm not any kind of expert or anything, but I've found a need for someone close and dear to me to schedule some time to get outside next week. So every hour or every 2 hours, we're going to do a little lap around the neighborhood. Maybe you might want to think about what you're doing, how you're getting your body moving, how you're getting your mind right during all of this nonsense. And hopefully we can get it all back to status quo here pretty soon. Anyhow, I am trying not to talk about it because that's what just fucking everybody is talking about. I'm trying to offer something different. So that's it. Now I'm going to let Hilla tell you what to do. And I will see you in a few days, brothers and sisters. I love you. Please be safe.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
I'm making fried chicken sandwiches for dinner after this. I'm going to go up and make them right now. I'm very excited. So I love you. I hope you're all being safe. Thank you for listening. Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I am proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.